Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present my work, our work. My name is Verónica Vasconcelos, as already you said, and this study was developed in collaboration with colleagues from Polytechnic University of Coimbra, from Portugal, and the National Research University Iger School of Economics from Russia. In Portugal, we have a devastating storm that caused lots of damage, especially in communication. So if I drop, my connect drop, I rejoin again. So thank you. So in this, the title of my presentation is An Exploratory Study on Ethical and Regulatory Perception of Gen AI in Higher Education. In this presentation, I will focus on how teachers from the Polytechnic University perceive the ethical and regulatory challenges associated with Gen AI in higher education. This presentation is organized into 7 parts: the context and research problem, research question and objectives, conceptual framework, methodology, data and empirical setup, interpretation and discussion, and finally, concluding remarks. So, in context and research problem, we can observe that the rising of generative AI over the last few years has become a central topic in higher education. Particularly visible because these tools are now used not by students, only by students, but also by teachers, researchers, and even the administrative staff. Their presence affects several dimensions of the academy. For example, teaching practices, assessing models, research support, academic writing, and access to information. At the same time, the rapid diffusion is taking place faster than the development of institutional rules and shared practice. And this is a big problem. This creates an important action. So, Gen AI offers efficiency, support, and innovation, but it raises questions about fairness, responsibility, transparency, and trust. So, this issue is not simply technology adoption, but it also how higher education institutions respond to a technology that is already being used in practice by everyone, but not yet fully framed from an ethical and regulatory perspective. Building in this context, the literature highlights several key challenges associated with the integration of Gen AI in higher education. So, teaching and learning are affected because AI changes are not only how students produce work, but also how teachers design activities, assessment, and research. Academic integrity is another central issue, especially because the boundaries between support, co-creation, and authorship is becoming less and less clear. Data and privacy also deserve attention because many users do not fully know how prompts are stored, processed, or potentially reused. On the other hand, algorithmic transparency is equally relevant because many systems operate as black boxes, making it difficult to understand how outputs are generated or justified. Concerns about discriminatory bias are widely discussed because these systems may reproduce or even reinforce these system inequalities present in the data they were trained on. And finally, institutional regulation became essential because without clear internal guidance, teachers may not adopt the same practices even in the same school of the same institution. We centered this presentation in a central question based on the challenge we identified and three main objectives. So the question is, how do higher education teachers perceive the ethical and the regulatory dimension of GenAI in their institutional context? So to address this question, we structured the study around the three main objectives. First, we look at institutional adoption, aiming to understand how GenAI is currently being used by teachers within the Polytechnic University of Coimbra in the 6 schools that integrate my institution. Second, we focus on ethical perception, particularly concerns related to bias data usage, and algorithmic transparency. Finally, we analyze regulatory frameworks, exploring how teachers perceive the need for clear and more responsible governance of AI in higher education. Together, these three main objectives allow us to capture both the practical use of AI in the institution and the concerns associated with this integration. We also take into account AI-related anxiety and behavioral intention, as this helped us better interpret how teachers position themselves toward this technology. It's not an objective, but it's also analyzed construct. To investigate this perception, we rely on conceptual frameworks that combines three models. The first is the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology that helps explain the factors that influence technology adoption and use, such as societal influence, expected performance, and facilitated condition. The second one is the technology readiness index, allow us to understand individual predisposition to adopt new technologies, including dimensions such as optimism, innovativeness, discomfort, and insecurity. Finally, AI anxiety captures the emotional dimension, namely the discomfort, uncertainty, and concern about the interaction with AI systems. So, together, these frameworks allow us to analyze not only how teachers use AI, but also how they perceive its ethical implications. In methodological terms, this was an exploratory study based on a structured questionnaire. The instrument was adapted to Polytechnic University of Coimbra context, but it is grounded in previously validated questionnaire used in other higher education institutions like Liverpool University, the High School of Economics from Russia, and the University of Naples. An important point is that before data collection, the questionnaire was submitted to the Polytechnic University of Coimbra Ethics Committee for ethical assessment. This was relevant to ensure that the study respects principles such as anonymity, confidentiality, and appropriate handling of participants' response. The survey was then distributed by the GAVIP, that is our office responsible for professional development and pedagogical innovation, using the official institutional mailing system. This is very important because means that the study was implemented within a formal institutional channel rather than through informal recruitment that sometimes we do. As I already said, this study was conducted in Polytechnic University of Coimbra, that is a Portuguese public higher institution with 6 schools. Our samples include participants from 5 of those schools with no response from the Oliver do Hospital Management Technology School. So we only obtain 25 valid answers in a universe of 845 teachers. Some reasons that we can think for the low response rate include large number of questions. The questionnaire is very, very long, and the data in the questionnaire was released, that is at the end of the semester. In addition to the describing the institutional context, we consider different users' profiles and perception dimensions, including frequency of Gen AI use, concern about discriminatory bias, perception of algorithmic transparency, and behavioral intentions, together with AI-related anxiety. Data were collected through a structured questionnaire based on previously validated instruments, like I say, the Unified Theory of Acceptance and Use of Technology, the Technology Readiness Index, and the AI Anxiety Construct. Well, response were measured with using a 7-point Likert scale, but given the small sample size, the analysis is descriptive, and exploratory. We focus on simple statistic, means, ranges, standard deviation, and in general patterns across the main constructs, rather than on robust inferential statistic testing. It was at the beginning our proposal, but with this small sample we cannot do that. Before discussion the results, it is important to note the small sample. So we interpret the results as exploratory patterns. So in macro ethics and bias, we observe that teachers who report higher concerns about AI bias also tend to show stronger support for macro levels ethical principles, such as fairness and responsibility. This suggests an alignment between bias-related concerns and broader ethical position. In transparency and usage, regarding algorithmic transparency, frequent users tend to report low concerns about opacity of AI systems compared to occasional users. This points to differences in perception associated with usage patterns. AI use and risk. One of the most interesting findings concerns the coexistence of intention to use AI and concerns about its broader risks. So teachers report a moderate to high intention to continue using AI in their daily life, but they also express concern about wider societal and existential risks. This is important because it shows that adoption does not necessarily imply uncritical acceptance. Teachers may be open to using these tools, but still remain cautious about their long-term implications. We found that intentions to use AI and concern about social risks coexist. So the average intentions to use is 4.89, while concern about societal risk is 4.68. Very close values. In that sense, concern should not be interpreted simply as resistant. It may instead reflect a form of critical maturity in relation to technology. Finally, these findings are consistent with the recent literature, which highlights the need for transparent, fair, and socially responsible AI governance in education. To conclude, this exploratory study showed that teachers from Polytechnic University of Coimbra adopt a balanced position toward Gen AI. They are willing to use these tools, but at the same time, they remain attentive to their ethical and societal implications. In terms of the main conclusion, we found that teachers who are more concerned about the AI bias tend to support broader ethical and regulatory frameworks behind institutional level. We also observe that intention to use Gen AI coexist with the concern about societal risks. In other words, adoption does not eliminate caution. Another important observation or conclusion is that the integration of Gen AI in higher education cannot rely only in technical support and training support. It also requires clear institution rules and guidances. Overall, this resultant suggests that teachers' position reflects both engagement and critical awareness. In terms of policy implications, the study highlights the need for institutions to establish clear policies for responsible AI use in line with emerging European regulatory frameworks, such as the UI Act. From a broader perspective, this work contributes to a more informed debate on the ethical responsibility and societal impact of Gen AI. Finally, in the future, we aim to increase the sample size within the Polytechnic University of Coimbra and extend, of course, the study to other Portuguese higher education institutions in order to strengthen and validate these findings and extract our other findings. Finally, the real change is not whether AI should be used, but how it can be used responsibly in the higher education. So thank you so much for your attention. I think I finished 3 minutes.
You were